Go.
Thanks for tuning in again. We really appreciate it. This is the Rob and Mike Show. This is Rob.
That's Mike.
You guys, first of all, we want to start with, we really just appreciate all of the feedback and the excitement around our premiere episode last week. You've all been amazing, and we really, really appreciate you. Please, please, please don't forget to go ahead right now. You can do it right now. Just go ahead and click on that like button and click on subscribe. Really, the like button super, super helps us. It pushes our videos in the algorithm for YouTube, and it just puts us in front of more people. So if you could go ahead, take a moment right now and like this video. Go ahead, click subscribe. And if you really, really like what you're seeing, go ahead and click on that bell for notifications, and that way you'll never miss one of our new videos, and you'll be one of the first people to see it when it comes out. And again, the Facebook support, all of the support that we've gotten, you guys have been amazing, and we really appreciate it.
Also, please do not forget to like us on Twitter, on the Insta, that is the Rob and Mike Show. You can find us, please like us. We post notifications when the videos are coming out, when they drop, what we might be talking about in the next videos, and also just another way for you guys to interact with us on social media. And as Mike said, once again, the gratitude for all the people who've liked our videos, viewed it, subscribed to it already. We really, really do appreciate it, and hopefully bring you some new, fun, great context every week.
Thank you again. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun. And like Rob said, all of our social media, including the YouTube channel, obviously, is the Rob and Mike Show. So whether it's Twitter or whether it's Instagram, it's all the Rob and Mike Show.
And that's once again N, not and.
In. Rob in. Wow. So this week, I'm pretty excited about this week. This was a hard week. So to give you guys some kind of background to what's going on this week, we ended last week's show, and as we ended last week's show, well, how are we gonna you have that sophomore thing where you have to be like, how are we gonna
transition to the next episode?
How are we gonna transition to the next one? What are we gonna bring next? And so we decided. Rob had mentioned the movie One Night in Miami, which is available on Netflix. We are, of course, not being paid by... No, I'm sorry, is that Prime? Prime, sorry, it's on Prime. We'll just go ahead and forget the fact that I just said Netflix. It's actually on Prime. So change that. Different subscription level. Anyway, so it's on Prime. It's One Night in Miami. And you had mentioned that, and I'm going to be really honest with you, until you had mentioned it last week, I had not really gotten into the fervor that was going on around this movie. Again, director of this film, Regina King.
Her movie directorial debut. She's done TV shows.
Done TV.
But this is directorial.
Right. And I think she actually, she did a couple of the Watchmen episodes, maybe? I think she might have done a couple of those. Obviously, she's on fire with her Cadillac commercials, and that's really great. I love the fact that they use DJ Shadow in a Cadillac commercial, which is really, really great. And if you haven't, this is really funny. I was talking to my wife about this. If you don't know the show, the song that they're using, which is "Run the Jewels" in that Cadillac commercial, it is a great tune. Shadow does a fantastic job on it, and it's absolutely hilarious. So DJ Shadow, "Run the Jewels" is the song, and it's really great. And you hear it every time you watch Regina King's Cadillac commercial. So it's really good.
But so this is exciting.
Yes.
It is actually adapted from a stage play, which I just recently learned last night doing my homework about this movie. As you can probably see or not, we actually have notes for this because we want to be very...
This one was hard. We had to do notes. We had to do notes on this one. There was so much... One of the things I came in today, and as we were going through sort of our pre-production meeting today, I realized that there was so much involved in this movie, and that we both came in with the tremendous amount of notes that we had, because there's so many great points in this movie. And I will say, first of all, you've got Aldous Hodge, who just what I would consider to be a tremendous job as Jim Brown.
Yes,
just ridiculous. Leslie Odom Jr. as Sam Cooke, which his Sam, it was a really transformative performance. We always, we've known, from Hamilton and all of his other work, we all know how good
Which
Leslie
I think
Odom
is what's
Jr.
great to be casting him in that, because you have someone singing. I do not believe that any of his singing in the movie was was lip singing.
No, you know what? And I did the same thing. I actually I couldn't find I couldn't find a definitive answer, but judging from knowing his prowess as a singer, obviously he's a Broadway star, he's a Broadway singer,
Tony Award winner.
So I have every belief that the singing in the movie is actually Leslie Odom Jr. doing it, and he really just nails it. Eli Gore, I think it's Gorey. I think it's Gorey,
and I think he's pretty new.
Yeah, he is. I think so, and it's. I haven't seen a lot of him, but.
He nailed Muhammad.
He really did. He nailed Muhammad. I think what's really hard, when you see Will Smith with Ali. his Ali, and there's been a few different actors that have done Muhammad Ali. The cadence of his voice and is that sort of that way that he spoke. Whether it was the way that he delivered his addresses in front of the camera,
his trash talking,
right, all that trash talking. But I think that Eli really nails it. I think that he finds that timbre of Ali's voice, and he finds, I think, a really great representation of Ali as a character.
And hopefully, I get this man's name right,
which is so hard. I know the first part is Kingsley.
Kingsley Ben Adir.
I want to say it's Adir. I'm probably wrong, and if we are, please let me know. Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize if we are butchering your name.
What's scary is he was very good as Malcolm X, but I also saw his performance when he took his glasses off.
Right.
If they wanted to do an Obama movie.
Yeah, no, he's already He's already lined himself up for every. He's lined himself up for so many different roles. And if there's a light-skinned black male that you have to
but his voice I caught was his patterns of Malcolm was really nice, but there was moments when he was talking to Aldous Hodge, Jim Brown, and he took his glasses off, and the sound of his voice, I was like, wait, is he being Malcolm or Obama right now? And it was really weird because I just saw it.
I think he does what I would say, it's like a general tone of leadership, right? He comes off as a very believable leader. And I think that's why he fits so well, whether it's Malcolm X or whether it could be like the Obama movie, which, by the way, not that we have any play but Hollywood when you're casting the Obama movie.
Yeah, we don't get anything out of it. We just think
Kingsley Ben Adir is probably your guy for the Obama movie. But yeah, he does a really, really great job. There are, in this movie, some moments that are so touching and so real. And I think hats off to both Regina and all of the actors in this movie, because they present these moments in the life that are so visceral and so tangible. They're, you feel like this is really happening. Now, and for those who are obviously this is, like we said, based on a stage play. But not only is it based on a stage play, but there are certain points in the movie where it's one of those films where they say, based on actual events, but super loosely based on actual events.
It's very much like a what if with these four characters.
No, it was funny because one of the things that I wrote down on this was it's funny because it's almost the beginning of this really weird racist joke, right? It's like, what happened? Well, because it is. It's like,
what happened? Malcolm X and Jim Brown and
Jim Brown, Malcolm X, and Muhammad Ali walk into a bar. And that's right. That's really what it is.
You're correct.
And so that idea, that premise, what would really happen? I think one of the things that the film does really, really well as well is, at the time that this starts, Ali's just beaten Liston. Ali's just beaten Liston.
22 years old, youngest heavyweight champion.
Yeah, super, super young.
Malcolm X starting to leave.
Right, Malcolm X is just getting to the point where he's starting to feel that things aren't necessarily right with the Nation of Islam.
Jim Brown trying to eventually switching from football to movies.
Right. Jim Brown, who has at this point, and I think that's also, and I don't think you can avoid. And again, Aldous Hodge. Mm-hmm. Has some of the most powerful acting as Jim Brown, and as Jim Brown, he's the catalyst, I think, for a lot of really amazing conversations that take place during this movie. But that whole, like you said, Jim Brown he's really at this point when the movie starts Jim Brown is a superstar. At
Yes,
this point,
he
right?
is the.
And I think that's right.
He's the face of the NFL at this present time.
Right, at this time, he is, no one, he is one of he is elite, right?
Yes.
He's an absolute elite at this point. Sam Cooke, yes, a super, super popular figure at this time. He's got, I don't think at this stage, and it's funny, because one of the things they talk about, I don't know how many or what the level of, like, how many number ones Sam Cooke had at this point. But Sam Cooke is riding, right? He's kind of riding at the top of his career at this point, right? And so it's what I think is interesting is that you have Ali, who has just really solidified himself as the greatest. He's the champion, right?
This is where his trajectory
right. This is where his trajectory starts to skyrocket, right? Mm-hmm. You've got Jim Brown, who is sitting on the top of the world right now. You've got Sam Cooke, who has done this amazing work,
and still ascending himself,
and still ascending. But at this point, you've got Malcolm is going through this divergence, right? Because Malcolm is at this point where, like, nothing is solid for him. He's not getting along with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This is shortly post his Mecca trip. Mm-hmm. Which is mentioned because he's just gotten to the point where, for Malcolm, he is now just discovering what true Islam is, mm-hmm. what his real place is to be a Muslim, right? And also not just that, but like where he has to fit in as far as being a leader in the community, because he's finding out at this moment that it's not just what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has said. It's not just it's not just this movement of trying to get every black person to become Muslim, but what that means to the civil rights movement. And this conversation that he has kind of brought his friends into, because I think really what this, if you can look at this film from the lens of, this is Malcolm X really trying to sell involvement and ownership of the civil rights movement
to his friends
and to these icons, which is just a really interesting take. It's incredibly well written. Again, Regina King does a absolutely fantastic work with this. And I think one of the reasons that you can't sort of overstate how good of a job Regina King does here is because you forget during a lot of moments in this movie that you're dealing with the likes of Sam Cooke and Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, and who are now looked at. I mean, and that's part of the movie, who are looked at as such these celebrities in the black community, mm-hmm. but at what toll, at what cost? Because I think even today, and we kind of talked about in the last video, mm-hmm. even more so then, what it was like to be that much in the eye, mm-hmm. as a black celebrity, let alone a black man, and what weight that carries. Right. Which is discussed really well. There is a lot of that in the movie and what they're going through, and I think that's the best part. For me was watching each of these figures go through what was the weight of being a black man in America, what was the weight of being a rich black man in America, what was the weight of being of having a microphone, right? Of having voice. To have a voice, right? And I think this is really what this movie is about, is because there's obviously we just went through the election, and we just kind of went again last summer we went through the Black Lives Matters movement, and this movie discusses in such great detail that burden of being black in America. And not only that, but it goes and it highlights the things that have changed and the things that haven't changed. And I think that's the hardest part about watching this movie, is realizing that weight that comes down on black America, and that weight that comes down on black men with a voice, is very different. When you look at obviously the last couple of years with Colin Kaepernick, and that being able to say, well, to have had your career, your money, your life taken away from you for having an opinion, for having and for just saying what was real, right? this movie does highlight like what I think what Colin Kaepernick had to have been going through, and what he had to have somewhere subconsciously knew that he could that he was potentially sacrificing.
Better word than sabotaging, yes.
Yeah, but that he was potentially sacrificing for having a voice, for speaking up,
especially in that specific league. We're not going to go too far into that. Now we've talked about some of the highlights, and we want to go back to that.
Yes.
Here's my only, and honestly, this is probably my only low light of the movie. Okay. Was the setup. I get the reason for the setup. I thought it was dragged. The Muhammad Ali one, I kind of understood.
Right.
The Sam Cooke beat the Copa, completely understand. Malcolm, the Jim Brown one, I could have went without. I thought it was a waste of talent of Bo Bridges. I get why they did it, but I was just like, I'm glad that didn't drag out.
I think that there was this thing in there where they really
had to show their low lights.
Right, their low, like the low points in their lives, or like what was, it's like, well, this is the rock bottom moment that changed how they. And I don't know that like the Jim Brown sequence was necessarily true to not just his life. But because this is a loosely based thing, no one is expecting this to be.
No, it's not a biop.
But I agree with you. That whole sequence where we bring in Jeff Bridges and and it didn't feel. It felt forced. It wasn't that it was wrong or that the acting was bad. It was Jeff Bridges. Everything was great. It felt forced, and only because. It was, maybe it was the one, and here's the thing, maybe it was the one that they had the least background on, that was the one that they had to make up the most, right?
Possibly.
Because we know that, there were several
Ali lost
moments.
His focus, got barely want to fight against someone underneath him.
Right.
Malcolm trying to figure out where he's going.
We all know the history of Malcolm's fall.
And Sam Cooke wanting to crack over that color barrier to be mainstream and stuff. So
I think that we know more about their trajectory than we do about Jim Brown's trajectory, because Jim Brown's trajectory, the private struggles that he had are less public than the private struggles that I think the other three characters had. But there are some really, there's some moments, and especially, so this was really great. So there's this, I agree with you. I think that the first 30 minutes or
30 minutes.
It's not that it's not hard to watch, or that it's not really well done. But there's a lot of setup. Like
for me, it was just like, okay, we've got this. Let's get to the.
But here's the thing, though. I think that's a different for, I think, us, or for those people who know those stories, right? I think if you don't know anything about the characters in this movie, that half an hour of setup is actually really necessary. I'm not gonna lie though, like I talked to you about this today, and and you talked to my wife about this today. I actually had to stop the movie and then restart the movie, because I just was not in the mind place where I could sit through a half an hour of setup dialogue before it really landed. I'm not saying that there wasn't meat in that part, but that setup I knew, and so a lot of that setup, other than of course the Jim Brown segment, it was just very, it was not talky, but it was it was just like, it was like, okay, well, this is good, but it didn't. I think that was the thing. It didn't. The movie doesn't like hook you until you're about 30 minutes in, but you get to that 30-minute mark, and once they get to the hotel room, and the actual conversations start between the men. And when you get to that point in the conversation where they're having those real moments with each other, and they're discussing their personal lives, and they're talking about their decisions between what they have to do, what they want to do, and then us knowing to a certain extent like where it's going to go. Because there's a lot of points in this movie where you're like, well, I know what he does, so this sort of,
but how did he get there?
Right, and how do they choose to take them?
And what I love in the setup, and maybe it's because it's based on the stage play, is I'm glad they didn't make this more grandiose. So I'm glad that they stuck with the concept of the four of them in the room, because on film, and I'm sure it's on stage, but I feel on film, because you've got those four walls,
right?
The tension that it was able to build, because these four men are in this closed room together, and they all have love for each other. But when you get to heated debates, as you and I, like I said, we've had heated debates just sitting there talking, because you become passionate about something.
Yes.
And that was what really just like stuck its claws into me, when they were just, when you felt the tension, when the Jim Brown goes to the bathroom just to get away from it, but he can't not hear it because it's such a closed room.
But I have to take this moment, and there is, and that is, and again, that's probably one of 20 to 30 like of these really just powerful 30-second moments in this film, and that's why I mean, I super highly recommend it. It is absolutely worth watching. I know that don't even think about the first 30 minutes, because honestly, if you don't know their background and you don't know those stories, the first 30 minutes is going to be completely interesting to you. And it wasn't that it wasn't interesting, it was that you have that, I think, as growing up in a black household in America, these are just kind of stories that you grew up learning. And so, you know Malcolm, Malcolm's story, Muhammad's story, that there's this really great moment where they use a historical moment out of context, right? And so there's the moment where Ali and Malcolm X, where Ali comes out and he decides that he's dropping clay, right? Which happened. Yes. Didn't happen the way that it happened in the film. No. But that during that moment, that was a moment with Malcolm and Muhammad Ali where he does kind of make those decisions that I am moving towards the Nation of Islam. This is just how this is going to be. We don't get to the point in this film where those decisions kind of crash his career, and he's got to make all those decisions about how it's right,
and not going into the draft and
exactly. This is all.
If you want to know that stuff, there is a movie called Ali.
There's totally other movies that cover that,
and great documentaries.
And you can also go watch the Malcolm X movie if you want to go.
You say your standout. You said your standout was Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown.
Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown was my absolute standout in this film. He was absolutely insane in this film. I thought that he there's this prowess that he has and I've seen him in so many different he's
that actor movies. Yeah, he's
Aldous Hodge is so good in everything that he does. And what was so fantastic for me was that he plays Jim Brown in this very subdued, real manner, right? And he plays him as someone that that is aware of his power, right? He plays him as someone who is aware, dude, I'm an NFL star, right? I get what you're saying, but tomorrow I'm going to wake up in the morning and be a freaking rich NFL star, whether I go to bed tonight or not. But he also has these but I think because he plays Jim Brown as this person who is able to say to the other characters in the film truth because he is confident in his position.
And he's actually the one who doesn't kind of fly off the handle.
No, he never, that's the thing. Yeah. He never has this moment where he's because he's had them so much, because he's had to deal with it, and he shows that through his character building. And I think that's probably one of the things when we talk about that intro sequence with him and Jeff Bridges, is you realize from then, wait a minute, Jim Brown's the one character in this movie who has, I don't know, not the ability to say no, but has in himself the confidence to say, they can't get rid of me, right? Because and it's not that Sam Cooke doesn't. Sam Cooke has this moment where he talks about how the white boys have to pay him, right? And it's super powerful. Leslie Odom goes to this thing where he says, and it's funny because it reminded me of this very recent thing that happened with Flavor Flav, which I total jump from Sam Cooke to Flavor Flav, but it's a very, very similar thing because there's this moment where Flavor Flav is asked, man, why do you act like a clown? Why are you always with the with the clock and and all of that? And Flavor Flav says, look, no matter what I do, they have to pay me. Yeah. And Sam Cooke does the exact same thing. There's this moment where Leslie Odom kind of portrays that same idea. yeah, you know what? I get that we're going through issues and we've got this and we've got this, and maybe you think that I'm shucking and jiving, but to be honest with you, when I shuck and jive, like, money ends up in my bank account, and you can't do anything about that, but that lends itself into a whole different stream of issues.
And so with that transition, I thought that Leslie Odom Jr. is the one who, for me, took the movie. And the reason for me is I think he has the best interaction with the other three characters. I think his arc is really good. I think he has such a profound moment of like, when he's talking to Jim, like, don't think I don't know what's going on. Don't think I haven't been thinking about writing music. I just don't know what to write yet. And for the fact of a black man in the 1960s to own his own masters, which is, there are artists out today who don't own their own masters.
Right, absolutely.
It was, which I did not know. And for me, obviously, him closing the movie with finally his kind of,
with
his kind of civil rights song,
which. So and I wrote that down because I think this is an important moment in the movie, and I think it's an important moment overall. But there's this great moment where it's kind of like the birth of a change is going to come. And in the movie, this isn't really how like the song was written, but you know the license that they take in the movie, and they play Dylan's.
When Malcolm plays saying, "There's this white boy who played this song, and what have you written?"
Right, and he goes through this thing of he goes to the same cookie. If Dylan can write this song that is about the struggles of our people, what are you gonna do? Right? If Dylan can write a song that speaks more about the struggles of our people than anything that you have written, and he can take it to number one, where are you? Because at that point in time, the whole idea, and there are a lot of people who feel that like, hey, my responsibility as a black man in America is to, if I'm famous, that's enough, because I've shown that I can make it there, right? I've given an example that this is possible.
Without representation, there is no,
Right, and then so you have this whole thing where, you come back around to that whole idea with Malcolm, where Malcolm saying, but understand now that you've got this huge megaphone and you need to use it, right? It has to be used. You have to help. You have to you have to pay back. You have to give back, and that's just And so that's this really again one of those outstanding moments. I actually just wrote the Bob Dylan moment.
No, I just wrote
that's what I wrote. I just wrote the Bob Dylan moment because that was so huge, that Bob Dylan moment. And then and I have to go here. Because there's all, like we said, there's all of these great 30-second moments.
Which would take us...
We can't. There's no way. We're already over time. We're going to try to get another 10 minutes out of this. And I thank you so much for sticking with us, because I know we're already at a half. We crossed a half an hour over like a minute ago. But there's these great 30-second moments that I just want to go over like a couple of them really quick before we end.
Okay.
And so the first one is that Bob Dylan moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to bring this out to you because there's this great moment. And again, obviously, like I said, I thought Aldous Hodge did just an amazing job.